According to reports, the FBI is looking into allegations made by the former Duke of York, which means more negative news for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. We learned this morning that they will not be attending the Easter church service. Prince Andrew is apparently now receiving specialized assistance after serving as a trade envoy. If both sides of the pond see an increase in police probes, this comes after the recent scandal surrounding Prince Andrew, who was found living on the grounds of a simple farmhouse rather than in an opulent estate. Beside this house, tucked up on bricks and partially hidden by trees, was a simple white static caravan. This arrangement gave a very different impression than one of a selected haven for peace, a striking, unambiguous image of a once prominent royal existence that has drastically reduced. This specific moment has such significance because it goes beyond Prince Andrew's simple address change or the peculiar sight of a caravan on royal grounds. It is a sign of something much deeper, a real-time, highly visible decline. A forced retreat that can no longer be hidden behind opulent walls, and this is the important factor that needs to be addressed. Greetings from Crown Era, your one-stop shop for in-depth royal drama analysis. You won't want to miss our next disclosures, so join up now to stay up to date on all the most recent events, noteworthy claims, and ongoing royal insights. That little caravan says more about the palace's strategic maneuvering, control, authority, and than it does about Andrew. However, this story goes beyond what is immediately apparent. Even in the midst of Andrew's scandals, Royal Lodge, a vast property inextricably linked to royal tradition and previously associated with the Queen Mother, carried an unquestionable gravitas and dignity for decades. His presence there sent a clear message. I'm curious about the current state of the royal family and the advice given to the monarch and his advisors. Additionally, it appears to me that they are attempting to put some distance between these two and the royal family as a whole. As you correctly point out, both Andrew Loney and I have stated that there is enough proof to examine some of their interactions over the years. It is not completely unthinkable that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor would end up behind bars. Despite public events, his former residence indicated that he still maintained a certain level of significance. However, that view turned out to be untenable. Prince Andrew's environment started to drastically shrink over time. His public persona has all but disappeared in recent years. His appearances became extremely infrequent, the public's attention turned elsewhere, and his former stardom began to wane. It is much harder to ignore what is left now. His royal duties were methodically withdrawn, and he became more and more alone as his reputation, which had already been badly tarnished by the fallout from his connections to Jeffrey Epstein, which he has continuously denied, was further damaged. There was not a single noteworthy incident that signaled this collapse. Instead, it was a methodical, intentional, and gradual procedure. His visibility, role, and stature gradually declined until nearly nothing remained. In the end, this produced a definite result. The pressure to leave Royal Lodge, that migration was a calculated move rather than merely a house move, his move to. The goal of Marsh Farm was to isolate himself from the public, lessen his exposure, and change a highly visible scenario into one that was more controlled, but the change didn't happen right away. Wood Farm was the intermediate stop. This particular element is important because Wood Farm has a royal past of its own, particularly as Prince Philip's retirement home. They might be able to toss objects at him there, you know. Could. Will Andrew go to jail? Is it possible that the guy who was once Queen Elizabeth's favourite son, the brother of the king, ends up behind bars? He ought to be imprisoned if he has committed any crimes. Prince Philip quietly and honourably withdrew during his retirement on his own terms and in his own way, but Andrew's current situation feels very different. Despite being on the same estate, its meaning is very different. While the other seemed far more like an enforced move, the first represented a personal retreat. At this point, the story takes an unexpected turn when the caravan, a small two-bedroom apartment on Marsh Farm's property, appears. At first, sources said it was meant for security staff, citing Marsh Farm's inability to sustain the vast infrastructure that Royal Lodge handled with ease. This one little feature tells a lot. Everything was seamlessly blended at Royal Lodge. Employees might work covertly on the estate without being noticed. Such a level of functioning was intended to be supported by the entire arrangement. In contrast, Marsh Farm was unable to. Rather, a makeshift building made of bricks had to be carried in. It seemed more haphazard than well thought out. This picture, which betrays a sense of upheaval rather than continuity, stands out dramatically for a royal dynasty built on image, history, and permanence. His current status is instantly called into question by this. The following spread of rumors that Andrew has been using the caravan during visits and apparently reportedly enjoying his time there is what really makes spectators stop and think. This idea immediately gained popularity as proof of his ability to adapt, modify, and accept a more straightforward lifestyle. And if that information demonstrates that other members of the palace were aware of this and had helped and encouraged Andrew over many years, then this viewpoint may have some validity, but it may also just be a part of a larger public conversation. In any case, it fits with a very particular story in which he embraces a more modest, everyday life and no longer maintains the same high position. The problem is that some spectators see this as staged communication rather than genuine human growth. It can be seen as controlled containment rather than personal progress. This raises a deeper query: who gains from this kind of image? Additionally, Marsh Farm has not been accurately shown as a peaceful country retreat, which is another feature that has received less attention. Ongoing renovations, new fences, improved CCTV systems, and increased security measures throughout the property are often mentioned in reports. It is noteworthy that Peter Mandelson and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor have both denied any misconduct. Additionally, the former prince will be moving from one of the king's private mansions in Sandringham to another in a few days. Private residence Ali. There is only one obvious way out of Andrew's predicament. In fact, this is more than just a suggestion of a more muted life. It obviously indicates a much more regulated atmosphere. The story takes on a very different tone once this is recognized. It is, in fact, private, but it is also controlled, observed, and well planned. This doesn't feel like a true fresh start the more one learns about the fencing, the security cameras, and even the staff quarters. Rather, it seems more and more like something that was purposefully created with boundaries. It's a measured distance, not freedom. Since none of these changes are isolated occurrences, this is where the bigger picture starts to take shape. Everything has its roots in King Charles. He has made it clear for years that Andrew is no longer an active member of the functioning royal family. Although this boundary has been set in public, the dynamics are far more complex in private. Harry, his escaped son, and Andrew, his unsuccessful sibling, of course. And Harry, well, according to one of the publications today, he wants to bring the children over if his father invited them. And this complexity results from the fact that families, particularly those in the royal realm, do not function in a straightforward manner. According to reports, King Charles has actively supported Andrew's new living situation, striking a careful balance between the need to preserve the institution and his obligation to his family. Interestingly, this same contradiction is embodied in the caravan itself. It is humble, virtually a direct representation of his diminished status however, it continues to be a crucial component of the royal system, quietly upheld. He hasn't been completely shunned as a result, but his status has clearly changed. This provides important insight into how the monarchy handles such delicate circumstances. It seldom ever makes one quick, decisive action. Rather, it adjusts gradually pulling people farther away from the public spotlight, gradually decreasing exposure, and softly changing positioning, all without totally cutting links. Andrew is detained at home. Yes, he is essentially incarcerated in an open prison. Yes, that's exactly what it is. How would you respond to some of my listeners and viewers who believe, particularly perhaps older, retired viewers and listeners who think, well, I would take that prison because it sounds pretty? Prince Andrew's circumstances have continuously mirrored this progressive pattern. First, he was stripped of his responsibilities, then he withdrew from public life, and then there were ongoing discussions about his housing, his financial support, his security arrangements, and even his overall position within the institution, all of which culminated in this. A motionless caravan discreetly parked on a farmhouse's grounds, tucked away inside a secret royal estate. For some reason, this one picture says more than any official statement could. It doesn't have the dramatic flair that is sometimes anticipated. In fact, it's quite the contrary, and that very ordinariness is exactly what makes its impact so devastating. Nothing draws attention to a loss of status more quickly than something that seems completely ordinary. This is the exact reason why these kinds of pictures spread so quickly. They break down the barrier that separates normal life from royal splendor. The expansive 30-room estate has the ability to conceal a great deal, soften public perception, maintain an illusion, and preserve the appearance of undisturbed privilege. But a simple white static caravan resting on bricks, slightly weathered, functional, and devoid of any capacity for embellishment, just cannot accomplish that. Told you then about, Wood Farm, and he's in exile, Andrew in Sandringham. And people, this stark reality exposes everything. It turns a gradual change into something tangible, indisputable, and easily understood by the general public without more explanation. As soon as this picture really sinks in, concerns start to surface. Is this the final destination of Andrew's life within the royal framework? Is Marsh Farm a long-term solution or just a temporary one? It is becoming more and more clear that King Charles is intentionally moving toward a leaner, more controlled monarchy, one marked by less extravagance, less controversy, and heightened structure. Andrew, on the other hand, has long been out of step with this new direction. As a result, the caravan may be more than just a small detail. It may be the clearest representation of his current position, still a part of the royal estate, but not at its center. Support is still given, but it is obviously lessened. He is still a member of the family, but he is no longer in the setting that once made his standing appear unbeatable. Impossible to ignore. What's even more significant is that once such a fundamental change is apparent, its influence goes beyond simple symbols and starts to transform everything around it. Because prestige in the royal world has always been about more than simply titles, people naturally begin to reassess the whole scenario, wondering not just where Andrew resides, but also what his actual function has become, and whether he has actually gained any sort of victory. It includes appearance, presence, and the very environment that characterizes a person. When these components shift, so does their significance. This is exactly what is happening here, a fundamental reset in perception rather than just a decrease in quality. The picture of that caravan in its simplicity rips through years of well-planned presentation. It replaces formality with something much more genuine and difficult to ignore, and once it becomes ingrained, it becomes the standard. The fundamental impact of such a moment is that every future appearance, update, and reference of Andrew will now be seen through that specific lens. The public has already seen the sharp contrast, regardless of what may happen next. It doesn't just represent change, it solidifies it. And once that contrast is evident, it is nearly impossible to reverse it. At this point, everyone's attention turns to what will happen next, as such moments do not just disappear. The question of whether Andrew's circumstances have altered is no longer relevant because they set the course for later events. That is very evident. The true question is whether this stage of his life will last forever, or if this is the last role he will take on. Or is it just another phase in a long process that has not yet reached its full potential? In the past, the monarchy has seldom made abrupt, dramatic changes. Instead, it has used phases, incremental repositioning, discrete shifts, and slow adjustments. Every step produces a new normal, and this situation is exactly in line with that established pattern. And once that new normal is accepted, it becomes much more difficult to return to the old, which is why this moment is so important. Although it might not seem dramatic on the surface, it could represent a permanent reset, a line drawn without the need for an official proclamation. If this is the case, then what we are seeing now is not transient, but rather the final form of things to come, suggesting that every element, no matter how small, is a part of a much bigger story that is still being worked out. The underlying message becomes evident when one takes a step back and looks at the whole picture. As Andrew and I have been saying for years, it's time for everyone to come clean. This is not just about one person. As the monarchy changes in real time, it sheds light on how the entire system is changing. Times such as this clearly illustrates how this transformation is taking place. Instead of making big statements, make small, noticeable changes. What was formerly carefully managed behind closed doors is now taking place in the open. This completely changes the way that everything is perceived. The caravan, the relocation, and the diminished presence all come together as parts of a broader strategic repositioning rather than as separate events. It's not just Andrew who is being repositioned. It's concerning. Determining who is authorized to represent the organization and who is not, as well as how clearly that line is established. Public opinion is more powerful than ever in a contemporary monarchy. And now, one intentional step at a time, that perception is being carefully molded. As a result, this specific moment is not an accident. It is a crucial component of a larger, continuous change. It's easy to understand why folks are still enthralled. Even the smallest things suddenly bear the enormous weight of something much more important. In the end, this may be the exact reason this tiny, mostly forgotten building has become such a powerful symbol. Because it eliminates any pretense. No royal staging, no spectacular entrances, and no sense of permanence. Just a small, peaceful area set against the backdrop of a much bigger narrative. And that striking contrast says it all. Prince Andrew's present house isn't the only issue here. It concerns what that place indicates. A life that was previously the center of attention is now clearly pushed to the outskirts. As a result, the real question goes beyond a simple address. It is about the future. Is this the pinnacle of his story? Silent, confined, and hidden? Or is this just another stage of an unresolved situation? If there's one thing to take away from this tale, it's that it's far from over. I now want to know what you think. Please express your opinions. Use the space provided for comments below on what you think this actually means. If you thought this analysis was insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with others who are interested in this developing narrative.